Hello and welcome to our panel delegates, commissioners, esteemed members of the audience, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for attending the Electoral Commission's forum today on how the franchise in the United Kingdom has developed to a system that guarantees democratic autonomy for all. I'm Wilson and I will be your moderator for today. Please join me in introducing our panelists for this forum today. First up, we have Ms. Sarah Amelia, Mr. Yap Zeng Yun, Mr. Nisa Asnan, and finally, Ms. Stephanie Hill. Well, first off, let me give you an introduction of the topic at hand today. The system of democracy in the United Kingdom stems from a long history of constitutional documents and events throughout which the franchise grew and developed. The achievement of the current franchise promotes nationhood and democracy, but also provides each citizen with a badge of dignity and personhood in casting their votes. This forum today will delve deeper into two of Hilaire Barnett's key features of a democratic electoral system. That there is a full franchise which promotes universal and equal suffrage, and that the value of each vote is equal. The United Kingdom has subsequently thrived to achieve these guarantees. Although the system is still not perfect and steps can be taken to ensure greater representation, such as allowing prisoners to vote. Nevertheless, let us begin with Sarah in discussing the period prior to 1832, where a mere 3% of the population were given the right to vote.
Thank you, Wilson. In order for us to understand how the franchise has developed in England, we must first and foremost take a look into her political history. Before the Magna Carta was signed in 1215, there existed constant conflicts between warriors and their groups for political sovereignty. Political power was exercised through force and was personal as well as volatile and inconsistent. The Magna Carta did not have an instant or direct effect on the mass population of England. It simply gave away the king's former powers to the nobles. The Great Council was an extension to the King's Council and was set up consisting of bishops, barons, and sizable landowners. It was their job to counsel the king on public issues and help him to collect revenue. From this, we can see that although power was divided, it was split among a minority that was already powerful, not truly becoming what we describe in a modern sense as an actual representative body. In 1264, Simon de Montfort, the Earl of Leicester, led a successful uprising that overthrew King Henry III. He went on to call for a parliament that consisted not only of the Great Council, but representatives from smaller lands and burgesses from bigger towns. In 1296, King Edward I called for the Model Parliament, which brought about three groups: the Lord Temporal, representing the nobles, the Lord Spirituals, representing the church, and the Commons, who represented the masses. The Commons were tasked with collecting taxes, becoming juries, and electing representatives. What was to become from this was the coming together of England's most representing governing body. In the time of the Model Parliament in 1296, voting rights were only open to persons entitled to attend the Sheriff's County Court. Only freeholders were permitted to participate. From 1296 to 1429, all freeholders, without regard to the value or size of their holdings, were permitted to vote at the county court meetings. Henry V was to later go on to limit this franchise to resident freeholders of land or tenements of an annual rent of over 40 shillings. For 400 years, from 1429 to 1832, the country's franchise stayed almost the same, aside from doubling the franchise. Many defenders of the system justified disenfranchisement through the theory of virtual representation, where it was believed that some MPs' dominant constituency interests would coincide with the interests of those disenfranchised, thus ensuring representation.
Thank you, Sarah. That was a very interesting history lesson, and I'm sure members of the audience enjoyed knowing what pre-1832 voting rights look like. Now, yeah, would you like to expand further on what happened post-1832?
Yeah, I'll do that. So, I'll be addressing the Reform Act and the Representation of the People Act. From 1822, a wave of reform was enacted in the United Kingdom to increase the franchise. The Great Reform Act 1822 increased the electorate by over 40%, although 8% of the adult population were given the right to vote. Small landowners, tenant farmers, and shopkeepers were amongst the few who were permitted to vote back then. Now, many saw the Reform Act of 1822 to remedy all of the inadequacies that existed pre-1832. Now, the Second Reform Act of 1867 increased the franchise to and lowered the franchise threshold, allowing for male laborers, regardless of societal standing, to vote. This act was not universally accepted by many, such as Walter Bagehot. He believed that the potential number of the working class would cause the higher order to either concede to their demands or risk the effect of their combined pressure. Nevertheless, the Third Reform Act of 1884 was the next milestone in extending the franchise. By equalizing voting qualifications between the countries and boroughs to take into account the increasing suburban nature of some county seats, it was seen that 28% of the population formed the registered electorate. Lastly, the Representation of the People Act 1918 provided for almost full universal male suffrage and, for the first time, allowed some women to vote in parliamentary elections. The Representation of People Equal Franchise Act 1928 was the measure that led to an equal and universal adult franchise for elections in the United Kingdom. Now, the principle of one person, one vote was finally achieved under the Representation of the People Act 1948, representing the culmination of the very factors listed at the start of for a truly democratic electoral system, namely a full franchise and the equality of votes. Now, let's delve deeper into the separate groups of people whose franchise have now evolved over the years. And as usual, we will start with ladies.
Thank you, Ya. One of the earliest recognizable instances concerning the issue of the enfranchisement of women would be in the year 1851, where an organization known as the Sheffield Political Association was formed and had raised a petition to the House of Lords to support the enfranchisement of women. While this did not lead to any major breakthroughs in the near future, several other organizations with similar agendas began forming over the following years. Examples of this would be the Kensington Society and the Manchester Suffrage Committee. Another significant moment in the evolution of the enfranchisement of women came in 1866 when John Stuart Mill, a well-known philosopher and member of the Labour Party, presented a petition in Parliament which called for the enfranchisement of women. Mill also called for the word man to be replaced by person, which effectively would allow women to vote. However, this amendment was defeated in Parliament. A similar issue relating to the wording of an act would occur 2 years later in the case of Chawton and Links, a well-known legal challenge to disenfranchisement. In this case, it was argued that the word man in the Representation of the People Act 1867 also took into consideration women and should thus be interpreted as such. This too was also rejected by the courts, as we will demonstrate in the following dramatization.
Hello, sir. Good evening. How may I help you?
I'd like to register to vote.
Right then. May I have some identification?
Of course, here you go.
Thank you. Right. Is Veil. Right, check that out. Dress. Right, sir? Congratulations, you have the right to vote.
Thank you, sir.
Here's your identification back.
All right.
How may I help you?
Hello, I would like to register to vote.
Are you a woman?
Yes?
I don't think women are allowed to vote.
No, they're not.
But the Representation Act says that man can vote, and I don't know, I just thought that man would include me, a woman.
Let me correct you there. According to the Representation of the People Act 1867, it says that only men are allowed to vote. Now, I don't think women are men now, are they?
Since you're a woman, you should just go home and know your place.
Yeah, get out.
Hello, good sir. How can I help you today?
Yeah, I would like to register to vote.
All right, could I have some identification, please?
Yeah, sure, no problem. Let me just... Right, here you go.
All right, let me check this out. Ah, Mr. Jeff.
Right.
Name, address, it all checks out.
Okay.
Congratulations, sir. You were successfully registered to vote.
Thank you.
Hello,
I
I would
help you?
also like to register to vote.
Ah, but you're,
I've got the vote. It's 1928 and I can vote.
how times have changed.
Oh, I'm so excited.
All right.
Oh,
Let me go
wow.
over this. Yeah, it checks out. You can
Ah, wonderful. Oh, thank you.
Get out. Get out.
Oh, man. We have the vote. We have the vote.
Wow, Lisa, I never knew that women had gone through so much to obtain their rights to vote. Well, what about our next group? Anyone willing to chime in?
Yes, I would like to chime in. The next group for us to discuss will be the Commonwealth citizens and the citizens of the Republic of Ireland. Now, in accordance with Hero Lolly's article, having Commonwealth or the Republic of Ireland citizenship is another qualification of receiving voting rights, forming part of the franchise as stipulated in Section 1 of the Representation of the People Act 1983. Now, the inclusivity of Commonwealth citizens in the electoral franchise stems from the history of the British Empire. Common law ruled that British subjects have the right to vote in local elections if the requirements, such as owning property, were met. The term British subject was defined as residents in the United Kingdom on the qualifying date prior to 1914. It was then expanded to include those who were born within the British Empire and dominions that owed allegiance to the Crown. Later, the British Nationality Act 1948 enacted citizenship of the United Kingdom and colonies, resulting in citizenships originating from the independent countries of the Commonwealth to still be constituted as a British subject, to which the Representation of the People Act 1949 bestowed the right to vote upon British subjects and the citizens of the Republic of Ireland. In present Britain, however, there have been calls for the revocation of the enfranchisement of Commonwealth citizens, one of whom is Sir Andrew Green, cited in Jack Doyle's article, who stressed that the enfranchisement was from an era of imperialism that no longer had a place in today's franchise. He further argued that close elections will be critically influenced by these Commonwealth citizens that have no significant investment or reliance on the future of the United Kingdom, as such, they should not be allowed to vote. Now, we will now present to you dramatization again on how this would impact the United Kingdom. Thank you.
This is Channels Television's breaking news.
Good afternoon, everybody. This is Wilson reporting for BCC News, and if you're just joining us, I'm here to report that tensions are rising as we have only one vote needed for either party, either the Liberal Party or the Conservative Party, to achieve majority in this constituency for the general election. And we are awaiting our final voter to come to cast his vote, and fate will then be decided on which party will win this constituency and achieve a seat in the parliament. Thank you.
My name is Ning Long. I'm from Malaysia. I am allowed to vote, so I'll be voting now.
Here you go. You will cast your vote on this paper.
Thank you. Ling Tai, I like. Ling Boy, I also like. I decided. Here you go.
Sure. Thank you, sir.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome back to BCC News. As you all know, we have just concluded our last voter has voted, and now the electoral commissioner for this constituency will now announce who has won this vote and achieve a seat in the parliament.
Winning by one vote and one vote alone goes to Isa Aznan! Congratulations!
There you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Isa Aznan has won with a majority of one vote.
Congratulations, Isa.
He has set a record for the
Well done.
closest ever fight in the history of the general elections. Thank you and have a good night. Now, with all that being said, what did the development of franchise amount to today? The current franchise can be found in the Representation of the People Act, 1983 as amended. Under the section, number 1, a person is eligible to vote in parliamentary elections if he or she is at least 18 years of age or older during the day of polling. Most importantly, the person must be a British citizen or a Commonwealth citizen who has the right to stay in the United Kingdom indefinitely. And lastly, or a citizen of the Republic of Ireland, or is a resident and has local connections with a constituency and is registered under the electoral register in the said constituency. Well, we talk a lot about eligibility. What of the eligibility criteria? Now, there are two main groups that are actually ineligible to vote. The first being members of the House of Lords. It is often argued that members of the House of Lords are not allowed to vote in the general election. This is because the House of Lords, or members of the House of Lords, have already a voice in the Parliament as they serve as members of the upper house of the Parliament in terms of passing bills. Hence, this is a legitimate reason to deprive them of their right and to also have their voice heard via the elected representatives in the House of Commons. With this being said, however, they are allowed to vote in local elections and votes concerning European matters. It is important to note that this position remains unclear due to the events of Brexit that has already occurred. Now, the other big majority that members of the public are often arguing about that are currently not allowed to vote is that people under the age of 18. Under Theresa May's term as Prime Minister, there have been lobbyist groups that have been lobbying for the voting age to be reduced from 18 to 16. This is because it is often argued that people who are 16 years old are allowed to serve in the army or allowed to pay income taxes when it's due, or if applicable. Hence, why can't they have the right to vote? Now, more towards a few fun facts and miscellaneous minorities that are not allowed to vote. First, EU citizens, again excluding citizens of the UK and Republic of Ireland, Wales, Scotland, Malta, and Cyprus, are not allowed to vote. And then, one fun fact that I think members of the audience might perhaps find interesting is that the Crown and members of the royal family are actually technically allowed to vote. However, this is because there are no laws preventing them from voting in the general elections. However, this is said to be unconstitutional by members of Parliament, and also official royal guidelines say that the head of state should ought to remain neutral in respect to political matters. Hence, they are bound by convention that they do not vote when it comes to a general election. Well, yeah, we previously talked about Commonwealth citizens not having significant investment in the United Kingdom or reliance on the UK's future. However, let's not forget there exists a huge group of disenfranchised people who very much have significant interest on the future of the United Kingdom and reliance on this wonderful nation as a whole. And in fact, these are people of prisoners. Maybe Stephanie, you would like to chime in on what on this matter?
Thank you very much, Wilson, for that introduction. And I think it's really important to look at both of our groups in society, those who are franchised and those who are disenfranchised. The view that all citizens have the right to vote is very much something that's ingrained in the United Kingdom's democratic culture. The restrictions that have been mentioned have a clear relevance to an individual's capacity to hold the franchise. Another example that is evident is people that have committed corrupt or illegal practices at elections are disenfranchised. This includes things like rigging and manipulating voters' rights. Such an act does undermine the integrity of the electoral process. Therefore, disenfranchisement of such people is permitted. However, the same cannot be said about prisoners. This disenfranchisement of prisoners undermines the universal and equal suffrage that the United Kingdom strives for. The disenfranchisement of prisoners affects around 60,000 prisoners, which is the same amount as the size of one parliamentary constituency. Article 3 of Protocol Number 1 of the European Convention on Human Rights guarantees an individual's democratic autonomy. Therefore, it has consistently been held that a blanket ban on prisoners' right to vote is arbitrary and disproportionate in pursuing legitimate aims. The case of Hurst, the case of Greenberg and MT, the case of Fifth and others, and many more cases stipulate the requirement of proportionality in limiting a prisoner's right to vote, indicating that the United Kingdom's full ban on prisoners' right to vote is against the Convention and in violation of it. We will now have another presentation that does demonstrate the case of Hurst and the impact that this has. Your Honours, I'm here today to represent my client, Hurst, who has been deprived the right to vote. It is unconstitutional and against the Convention to put a blanket ban on a prisoner's right to vote, and I ask you to allow him to vote.
The European Court of Human Rights ruled that the incarceration does not automatically deprive an individual of a vote.
But any restriction must be proportionate in pursuing a legitimate aim.
I hope you very much enjoyed the presentation that we just had, and it does demonstrate that it's very disproportionate to have a ban on all prisoners' right to vote. Firstly, it's not justifiable to prohibit all prisoners from voting in a manner that is indiscriminate. Secondly, a loss of an individual's right to vote plays no overt role in the sentencing process, nor does it aid towards a deterrence of a crime. Thirdly, grounds of moral unfitness cannot be relied upon, as this would imply that the franchise is based on an individual's moral capacity. Lastly, incarceration does not determine the ability of one to cast a vote. Despite all of these factors, the United Kingdom has held that such a ban on prisoners is appropriate and that decisions of this kind should be decided by democratically elected lawmakers. Attempts have been made to conform with the European Convention on Human Rights and their obligations under 46 of this convention. The Voting Eligibility Prisoners Draft Bill of 2012 and subsequent Joint Committee recommendations of 2013 recommended that all prisoners serving a sentence of 12 months or less should be entitled to vote. In 2017, Secretary of State for Justice David Lidington published proposals limiting the previous proposals in allowing only prisoners on temporary licenses to vote. Although this is far from being in conformance with the notion of political equality that underlies the idea of an individual's right to vote, it has been viewed as a compromise in promoting universal and equal suffrage in accordance with the criticisms first raised in the case of Hearst. At current, the restrictions that are in force against a prisoner's right to vote undermines the ability of the United Kingdom to reach its goal of full, universal and equal suffrage. Although the right to vote is not an absolute right, it should only be limited where strictly necessary and proportionate to do so.
Well, following our discussion, we have witnessed the evolution of the electoral franchise. Universal adult suffrage is considered the cornerstone of democracy in the United Kingdom. But however, it is less than a century old. It has become a long way and has developed into a franchise that all countries should have strived to achieve. From the labourers to women, to the case of Hearst and the UK, where the European Court of Human Rights held that it was unlawful for prisoners to have the right to vote impeached. Throughout this development, the adherence of universal and equal suffrage has ameliorated by granting the right to vote to a larger and more diverse group would result in elections truly reflecting the voice of the people. Thus, it can be agreed upon that democracy in this case, democracy autonomy, requires the right to vote and participation in politics. And that is essential to every democratic nation in this world. Thank you.
In the west shall rise a sinister creed. The rich will get what they want, the poor will lose what they need. The devil knows our fears. He told all his friends they'll block the sun with their lies as darkness